As it is 9:32, I think we will go ahead and get going for the morning. I want to say good morning and welcome to everyone. Welcome back to the Citizens Budget Advisory Council and the work plan for the fiscal year 25-26. It is good to see folks that are some familiar faces, but we will go ahead and just kind of go around the virtual room as it were, introduce staff, and I'll allow the CBAC to go first. I am just kind of going to go in the order that I have here. For those of you that don't remember or haven't seen me in a while, again, I'm Scott Tesh. I'm the city's budget director, staff resource to CBAC, obviously, for all the things that it does. We will start with James Cena. You are first on the grid there. So if you want to introduce yourself, and we'll keep going.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jamesina Woodyard, and I've been with CBAC for 3 years. And I live on the southwest part of Winston-Salem. I work at School of the Arts, UNC School of the Arts, as a budget officer, budget manager. And it's good to see everybody. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Hey, Seta, you are next on mine.
Good morning, everyone, and Happy New Year. I am Hisetta Schuler, and I actually work at Winston-Salem State University. I'm sorry my camera is not working. It keeps saying that my internet is stable, but it's glad to see everyone and Happy New Year, and I hope we can do some great things this year. Um, I think this is my second term with CBAC, and so I'm happy to be back.
All right. Fred, got you next.
Hi, I'm Fred Salisbury. This is my fourth year on CBAC, I believe. And I'm a professor at Wake Forest, and I live in the West End.
All right. Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily Cornella. This is my second year. Looking forward to getting started again. I live in Buena Vista, and I am the director of search for a marketing company, but more importantly, the primary caregiver to a 8 and 5-year-old. And in a former life, I've worked in budget offices in city and county governments. So I love discussing all of this.
Tony.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tony Piacenza. This is my, I think, third, maybe fourth. I don't know. Hard to say. It's just all the great work runs together. Um, but I am a relatively long time resident of Winston-Salem. I live in the West End as well. I am a former educator, but now I manage sustainability reporting for the company that owns Food Lion and a number of other national grocery chains. So yeah, I think it's been a great group so far. Good to see so many familiar faces back and ready to jump into the new work.
And Miriam.
Hey, good morning, everyone. This is my second year, I believe. Um, I am a program coordinator for the North Carolina League of Conservation Voters Foundation for the Boards and Commissions program. Um, I actually live on the northeast side of Winston-Salem, so lots of fun over there. I primarily before this worked in the construction industry, and I was always in the book. So I have a lot of background knowledge in like budgeting and numbers and all the things. So this really interests me, and I'm interested and looking forward to see what comes out of this year.
Thank you. I believe that's all the CBAC members we have. We do have one or two who are not with us today, and if they join, we will let them pop into the meeting. We do have a couple of staff members, some familiar faces, and at least one new one that we'll be working with. So as I go around here, Janice, if you want to reintroduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Janice Ellenbrand. I work as a senior budget and evaluation analyst in the budget office, and I'm excited to work with you guys again this year.
And Sarah is new to budget. I will allow her to introduce herself as well.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sarah Manus. I'm the Senior Administrative Assistant for the Budget Department. I just started 3 weeks ago, so this is one of my first projects. So I'm excited to work with all of you and learn from all of you.
I believe many of you have seen Sarah Coffey in the past, so we now have two Sarahs in the budget office. We will try to keep those in line. And then also, I believe Renee is with us as well. Renee, are you on the call?
I am. Good morning. My name is Renee Williams. I am a budget analyst here at the City of Winston-Salem, and I look forward to seeing what y'all talk about and decide to do this year.
Thank you, Renee. So again, welcome to everyone. I hope that you are warm in your spaces, and as we discussed before the meeting, preparing for whatever wintry mix may be coming this weekend. As you have no doubt seen, the agenda includes our work plan for the year to talk about the resident survey. So what I will say is there were several options. We ended last CBAC year with a couple of things that we might may have come back to talk about. One of them was operating deficits at some of our public assembly facilities. After having a conversation with the city manager, there are quite a few things on the public assembly facility side that are probably going to be driven by the capital side of things. And we have currently a facility condition assessment that is being done of all of our facilities. So I am more than happy to keep you in the know about that which you were very interested in last year. But in talking with the city manager, I think he was much more interested in having this group particularly look at some data in a little more detail than city council does and provide some recommendations to the city council about overall perceptions, about the types of services that we're providing, and whether residents are liking them, and to dive further into the details. And we'll talk about this a little bit today of, are there different groups of the city that have different expressions or different perceptions of how we are providing service? Paul is joining us. How we're providing our services. So I want to stop here, and this is kind of difficult to do in the Zoom area. If you could use the hand raise function in Zoom or in the chat and let me know, have any of you actually received or filled out the city's resident survey before? Not seeing. Has anyone gotten a resident survey in any other jurisdiction they've been in? Interesting. And I would say good morning, Paul. As you come in, we've kind of done introductions and
That was a little late. I have received the Winston-Salem one. Yes.
okay. Thanks, Fred.
Yeah, but not this year.
Yeah,
Not
not this. I will
Not
tell you,
this-
it is substantially similar. In years, we try to keep the questions as similar as we can so that we can do trending over time. So I will do kind of at the 30,000 foot level, and I will tell you for the first time in a long time, we're going to give CBAC some homework after this, so I apologize. But the resident survey goes out once every 2 years for us. We originally started doing it once a year to build a baseline trend, and now we do alternating years of resident survey and internal employee survey using the same vendor. But the tool itself is supposed to be a 10 to 15-minute survey. Depending on how much you overthink and overanalyze the questions, it can be a little more than that. But the survey is about 6 or 7 pages long, and we ask a variety of questions. And when I tell people about it, I say essentially we ask 4 types of questions. At the very beginning of the survey, we ask what we call community-wide questions. So we ask you, how do you feel about Winston-Salem as a place to live, as a place to raise children, as a place to work? How do you feel about the local economy? How do you feel about how growth is being managed? How do you feel about affordable housing? So kind of some of those community character type questions that we're not necessarily responsible for as city government. We drop down one level, and then we ask more at a kind of a departmental or overall service level. How do you feel about police, fire, solid waste collections? And while we're doing that, we also ask residents to prioritize those so that we have an ability to say, how do you feel about it, but also where is it on the priority level? And I'll show you some of that data here today. We then drop one level below that, and we ask very service-specific questions. So instead of just asking, how do you feel about solid waste collections, we ask, how do you feel about residential refuse? How do you feel about leaf collection? How do you feel about bulky item collection? How do you feel about recycling? And so for each one of our kind of external services, we ask both how you feel at the department level and then that individual service level. And then the 4th series of questions, I'm going to call them other/demographic questions. So we do ask you, all of the standard demographic questions, what ward you're from, age, homeowner versus renter, all that kind of stuff. But we also ask about 10 or 12 questions at the end of which services you use. And so we'll ask, have you ridden a WISTA bus? Have you been to a recreation center? Have you called CityLink? Do you feel that you've been the victim of a crime in the last 12 months? That type of thing. Part of that is to catch how many people are using our services, but it's also when we look at the data to be able to filter by those people. And so I can tell you how people feel about the maintenance of our rec centers of the ones that have actually been to a rec center. Or more specifically, this comes up in WISTA. What do the people who actually ride the bus feel about the bus? I will tell you some of that. You have to have some discussions about how many people are answering those questions. But I will here in just a couple of minutes do a screen share. I'm going to show you the exact same information that City Council actually got just last week. The most recent survey ended in December, and we have gotten the data back. And so I am going to give you kind of the 20 or 30,000 foot level presentation for a resident survey. And then we'll talk more about where we intend to go and where we intend to dig in the next couple of months. So before we get started with that, at a high level, does anybody have any questions or opening remarks about resident survey and that as a work plan item for you for this year? I'm seeing mostly head shaking no. I will say, as we always do, the secondary part of the work plan for CBAC is always to look at the city manager's recommended budget. So I am going to also slide in next month what we showed City Council from an operating and capital budget perspective as the early forecast. And as that progresses along, we will share with you information about the budget engagements that we're doing, if you want to be a part of them, and also kind of where we're headed. Fred, you got a question?
No.
Okay.
But I have a question if Fred doesn't.
Okay.
Raise your hand.
I wanted to know how are the participants of the survey selected? Or is it, and also, do they use the same participants?
So they do not use the same participants each year. They are randomly selected, and I am going to, that is a great transition into sharing information with you that I shared with City Council about how the survey is done, and then we'll get into some of the high-level results. So for our City Council, we have 3 new members that had not seen the resident survey data before. So I will go through kind of the process, and then if y'all have additional questions, we can get into those. But let me try to screen share this now. So you may see a file folder here for a second, but I promise PowerPoint should pop up. Are we seeing the slides and they are cycling through? Okay. So
Yes.
again, this was part of the council had a 2-day retreat last week over at Grayland to talk about all kinds of strategic priorities from transit to public safety, housing, homelessness, solid waste collections, budget, all types of things. But we led off with some of the resident survey data. And this is exactly what they saw. So this presentation designed for them is to talk about the methodology of the survey and then what we get back from it and how we look at that information. And so the survey really is designed to tell us perceptions and short-term priorities. Part of the survey says, which of these things would you focus on or tell city government to focus on in the next 12 to 24 months? We'll talk about trend data a little bit, and then as part of future meetings with the CBAC, we will be diving into all kinds of trend data. And then I'm going to show you some snapshots of the benchmarks and where we are with comparison groups. And then CBAC will also have an opportunity to dig significantly further into the benchmark data as part of its work plan this year. So what does the survey look like? Hey, Seta, to get to your question. So the contract that we put out, we use ETC Institute out of Olathe, Kansas. And they are one of the premier local government survey providers in the nation. At one point, they were doing surveys for over 900 cities and counties in the U.S., and they do them for many of our peers here in North Carolina. I do believe High Point, Raleigh, and Durham are all using ETC. But they send out the way this works. They send out a letter in advance saying you've been selected as part of the randomly selected pool of residents. They purchase data and information from a third party source to do that. So they purchase addresses and names from a different entity, and then they send out a huge mailing saying, "Hey, check your mailbox next week. Something is coming in for you." So we send the survey physically via mail. I will say the vast majority of people actually fill it out online. There's a QR code at the top of it, as well as just the website that you can click on. And the vast majority of people fill it out via their online portal. You can handwrite it up and send it in. Every once in a while, somebody will mail it back to us to send it back to ETC, which is a little unusual because it comes in a self-addressed stamped envelope. But we require a minimum of 1,000 responses from city residents, and we require a minimum of 100 per ward to make sure that we're geographically hitting the city for our 8 districts. I will show you here the demographic data. Other than one kind of interesting place is very reflective of the city overall. And the entire purpose of this is so that we can take a snapshot of the city and be able to say with a statistically significant sample population that this is, generally speaking, how residents feel about this service, X service, Y service, the ones that we're asking about. So we do have, because we ask for 1,000 responses, we actually have a margin of error of plus or minus 3%, which is a little better than the 5% that most of the other cities do when they get a smaller sample. We do tout, as you can see on the graph to the right, that we are hearing from more of our residents than most of the other jurisdictions. And again, in doing that, we kind of lower the margin of error as well. Any questions on survey methods before we kind of go into what the respondent profile looks like? Okay. So overall, on this slide, we've got age as well as race and ethnicity. From an age perspective, you can see there is one slice that's 18 to 24 that's really small, but then you kind of get into the 10-year groupings, and they do a really good job of getting different age groups to respond back to this. When you look at the racial demographics, the makeup there, it is almost exactly what the census data says we have in terms of our breakdown of white, non-Hispanic, African American, and Hispanic or Latino populations. So they're doing a really good job there as well. Rent to own is always, we always have a higher level, and ETC tells us in all of the surveys that they do for local governments that you tend to have a higher level of home ownership. They do try to the extent possible to oversample slightly for multifamily residential to get some of that rent population up. But as you can see on the right, 82% of the folks who respond are in a single family residence. In Winston-Salem, 82% of our population does not live in a single family residence. This is just kind of a reflection of the people who respond to it. And again, when you talk to the survey provider, this isn't terribly dissimilar from what they see in a lot of other cities. The one on the left is the more interesting one that I do not have an answer for that council has asked me about. If you were to see this data for years going back, which we will jump into, female male would have been split like 50-50 or 49-51 every time we did this. We had a significantly higher population of female respondents this year, and I have no idea why. Got a couple of chuckles and jokes out of it from city council that it's the women who are really doing the work in the household kind of thing. But we are going to reach back out to ETC and ask them, have they seen this in other places as well? Is that more of a trend, or did we just have something weird or anomalous happen for us this year? Again, I don't think that really changes a lot of how people perceive how some of our base services are provided, but kind of interesting to see. And then from an income perspective, the same thing, a pretty good split. You can see almost a fifth of people didn't want to respond. But then also we have some households, again, 18%, almost a fifth, with a household income under 30,000, another 23% or almost a quarter in the 30 to 60,000 range. And then we have some respondents with household incomes above 100,000. So a good distribution on the income level as well. So overall, and I will say again, CBAC is going to dive into this. There are more demographic questions that we ask, and I will give you the report, and we can, and if you want to dive further into all of the different types of demographics, we can do that in the coming months. But what does the data really tell us? So again, it tells us priority and satisfaction with the services that we're providing. We get the benchmark data and we get to see our trends. And then there are two ways that we kind of marry the importance and satisfaction data together. One is that when we talked about that higher level of kind of the department level, how does police compare to fire, compare to solid waste, compare to city link, and those types of things. And then further, when we ask about specific services, recycling, leaf collection, and those types of things, we ask inside the survey, tell me how you feel about those solid waste collection services, and then tell me which ones within those areas are the one or two highest priorities for the next 2 years. And so ETC has a formula, again, where they will say, this was both a high priority and a low satisfaction area. This is somewhere where you should be spending more time. So I'm not going to go through everything that's in here. What I will note off of this, there are a lot of, and we'll provide these slides, but there are a lot of services where more than 50% of the residents are either satisfied or very satisfied. That middle bullet point is probably the more interesting one. The only two services in the entire survey where more than 50% of people were dissatisfied are both related to downtown parking. Obviously, that is a result of policy changes that the city council has recently made. There have been a lot of write-ups in local newspapers, a lot of social media and news media attention to that. It will be interesting from my perspective to see 2 years down the road, does it still look like this, or is this really just a reaction to a point in time where that decision was made and people have angst about it? But something that was obviously taken to heart, the city manager put forward, and the mayor and city council actually suspended some of the parking rates during the holiday season as a result of some of this, just to see how people would react to that. So I think there are some policy decisions still in the background there. But again, the only two areas where more than half of folks that responded were dissatisfied related to parking. And the bottom bullet point is just, where do we have a few things that are touching up? We're going to hit on some of these. I do want to draw your attention to that bottom bullet point, city tax value. We did raise taxes this year, and we had the reval at the same time. So I have one slide I'm going to show you that's a little interesting, how we compare differently to some of our benchmarks. But this, generally speaking, when we ask at that departmental level, how do you feel about services, where you're satisfied with them, and what priority level are they? So if we look to the top right corner and you see fire, what that's telling us is that the residents said fire services are the highest priority in the city, but they are also the services with which they are the most satisfied. The way when I'm talking to city council that I tell them to look at this is to look at the 4 quadrants, right? So that top right quadrant is, it's important, but you're also doing relatively well. As you get down towards where recreation is, again, it's important. It's in the middle for importance and kind of in the middle for satisfaction. And then you go around the bottom right is satisfaction is higher, but importance is lower. The bottom left quadrant, satisfaction is lower, but so is importance or priority. And then we tend to stop on that top left quadrant up there. Streets for a very long time has been the only thing in that top left quadrant. And this year, neighborhood services tried to sneak in right on the line. But this is the area where people are less satisfied, and they're telling you it's a higher priority. So when we look at that, streets maintenance essentially is the 3rd highest priority amongst these 12 services, and it's one of the least satisfied. You do see neighborhood services and WISTA satisfaction is a little lower. I'm going to tell you, the data nerd in me is going to love to dig into this data with you. This is based on satisfaction, and this is all done on a Likert scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is very dissatisfied, 2 is dissatisfied, 3 is neutral, 4 is satisfied, and 5 is very satisfied. What I will tell you is, if I were to change this, this shows the 4s and the 5s for how satisfied are you. If I were to change it to the 1s and the 2s, how dissatisfied are you, streets moves way to the left. What you have are a lot of people that are neutral for WISTA and more that are neutral for neighborhood services, because they may not see or use those services as much. But we will have an opportunity to dive in and see kind of how that works. But again, at a high level, what I tell city council is Streets is one of those things. It is in your infrastructure part of good government in our strategic plan. It is obviously something that residents are telling you is a high priority and they're not extremely satisfied with. Neighborhood services. There's also a lot in our current strategic plan about neighborhood aesthetics, about cleaning up the community, about community character. And so we're starting to see that kind of float up in the priority rankings more than it has in the past. And again, we can dive into some of those services as well. But this is the 30,000 foot level of satisfaction and priority at that departmental level.
Hey, Scott,
Yeah.
where do
Fred.
sidewalks come in?
So the streets and sidewalks are together.
Oh, they're together. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. That was
Yep. We try to shorten it to not have those categories be quite as long. So they say recreation services and streets and sidewalk maintenance, but we shorten them down for the graphic. So, and I know you might have to get into the screen and stare in a little bit because there's a lot of writing on this one. Again, so that slide that we just showed is at the departmental level. This is where we ask at the service area level inside each of those service areas. So that first bullet point up there that says police and fire, we have a series of questions that are about public safety. And within that public safety area, ETC runs that model to say, where are people least satisfied and have shown something as a highest priority? They pull those out. I'll actually go into the report next month and show you how they do these calculations. But in the public safety area, overall crime prevention efforts and police visibility are the two highest priority questions or components for that. And again, inside streets, transportation, and public transit, you get maintenance of city streets, and then you get the two parking questions again. Very, very interesting there. Inside neighborhood services, you get rehab programs are the most important. And then you've got kind of blight and demolition of vacant structures and nuisance properties, as well as some private property cleanup. Recreation and parks, it's always seems for several years to be just general maintenance, and then youth programs and activities are among the two highest priorities. Within solid waste collection, so you see brush, leaf, and street sweeping. This is interesting because I'm also going to show you comparison data from our benchmarks that says, although this suggests that brush and leaf collection are where we should be focusing, we're actually significantly better than our benchmarks in these. All of this, again, is perception data. So if the community thinks those services need to be better, sometimes it matters how we're doing compared to our peers, and sometimes it doesn't. But it is interesting to see kind of this data juxtaposed with the benchmarking data that we'll look at. And then we did ask, yes, somebody had a question.
Does the solid waste include recycling?
It does. Yep.
Okay, just double checking.
Yep. And then we did change the survey just a little bit for kind of the sustainability and environmental services together. For the first time, we asked questions about sustainability, carbon emissions, the use of alternative fuels, that types of thing. And so for the first time, we do have one of those priorities being investments in renewable energy sources as well, something that's on council's radar, as well has been a strategic priority for a while. And we saw that show up because we asked it for the first time this year. The blocks over to the left are, again, reminders at a strategic plan level. Public infrastructure and public maintenance is part of the strategic plan. Overall community safety is part of our strategic plan, and community aesthetics and neighborhood character are a very integral part of the strategic plan. So a lot of what we're hearing from residents links directly back to the things that we say are our priorities and we're already working on. From a benchmark component, and I'm going to skip kind of to the charts here, but the bullet points here are just telling you we are above more than half of the national averages for both the U.S. and the region. The U.S. obviously includes the entire country. The region is actually a little interesting. We're in the Atlantic region for ETC. We don't get to define our region. It's not typically, I think sometimes we think of ourselves being compared to the Southeast. And the Atlantic region, and I'll have to go back and find the exact states, but it includes North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, Tennessee, West Virginia, Delaware, maybe Georgia, but it's kind of a mid-Atlantic type, almost southern region. It's not what we typically think of as mid-Atlantic. It's not typically what we think of as southern or southeast either. But when we look at those, So again, these are some of those kind of what I would call community level questions. When we look at Winston-Salem as a place to live, you can see there, Winston-Salem, 81% of the respondents said either 4 or 5, so satisfied or very satisfied. And you can see what the regional and national benchmarks look like. So from this data, we are taking, and it looks like this, I will tell you, trending over time, we are always significantly above the benchmarks. I will also tell you, and we can look into this later, these would be different if you look 2 years ago. As a place to live, we were closer to 89 or 90%. So we did see a 10% drop, but the regional and US benchmarks saw a similar 10% drop. And so in talking with the survey provider, there are a lot of these kind of community character, community level metrics that saw these 7 to 10% drops just across the board nationally. And so whether that's national politics or polarization of people's belief structures, our trends did not look significantly different except for 1 or 2 questions, and we'll kind of talk about those. But you can see here as a place to live, work, raise children, overall image of the city, those types of things, we are above the benchmarks. So when we come down a level to just kind of that departmental level, same thing, fire, solid waste, water, sewer, police, recreation, again, several areas where we're significantly above those benchmarks. And I know you're thinking, is he going to show us the ones where we're below? Give me just a second. I'll get there too. And then kind of, again, that third level of where are we at with respect to the individual services. And this is where I draw your attention to quality of bulky item pickup, where we are 26 to 29% above the benchmarks. So while there are quite a few people who may not like the annualized service that we have for bulky item, there are a lot of people who do like it in comparison to how it's being provided in other places. And so again, we've got recycling services, residential trash services, fire prevention efforts, lots of areas. And then we kind of really tail off. And the last 1 or 2, you get towards, are they really statistically significant with respect to signals and signs, and particularly street lighting? I would tell you 1 and 2%, that's inside the margin of error. When we pulled the screenshot, we just pulled the things that were above. So I know this is the same type of graphic. The person who was creating these went on paternity leave. I tried to adjust them and I made them worse. So this is negative variance, but shown vertically. So you'll see each one of these -26, -18, -17. These are the ones where we are worse than the benchmarks. And I will tell you, the first one is one that we have been working with ETC to better understand. And I think we're going to have to dig in. We are habitually way worse on this accessibility for streets and sidewalks with people with disabilities. And we don't really know why. I will actually tell you, we are engaging in an ADA survey through the attorney's office of a lot of our both facilities and our public transportation infrastructure. It is possible that we come back and we are realizing, hey, we just have a lot of places where we need more street cuts. We need all kinds of infrastructure that we don't have. So that's one that we're going to have more answers to potentially in the next 12 months as a result of kind of a survey that we're doing. So you can read through these, but for city council, if we think about these in terms of what we looked at, the ones at the top are transportation infrastructure related. So you've got the ADA, streets and sidewalks, but then you've got maintenance of streets and sidewalks, on-street bicycle infrastructure, condition of sidewalks, all transportation infrastructure related. And then you have 3 of these that are community safety related. So you've got traffic laws, but you've also got the overall effort to prevent crime and the overall feeling of safety in the city. I want to stop on that overall feeling of safety in the city one and say, it is very interesting. Our residents give us higher marks for how they feel about our police department and overall police services, but lower marks when it comes to overall safety. So it's not necessarily a function they think the police department isn't doing well, but our residents do feel on average less safe than other communities. And same thing, 3 of these are also related to kind of that whole community aesthetics thing that we discussed. So you've got enforcing exterior maintenance on private property. So that's, people keeping their houses up to code, trash and debris on private property, as well as litter, so trash along city streets. So the ones where we are significantly different from our benchmarks are actually areas that council had identified as part of their strategic planning process last year and areas that we are working on. There is a lot in the transportation infrastructure area going on, and there is quite a bit in community aesthetics, both with solid waste collection as well as some of our rapid response team things with our vegetation management department and neighborhood services departments who do litter pickup and mowing and those types of things. So before I go any further, any generalized questions? And again, we're going to dive into all kinds of data, and you're going to see the data nerd in me just jump out of his shell and be really excited in future months. But anything benchmarking wise off of those that caught your interest that you wanted to ask questions about?
Scott, are y'all able to, thinking about the ADA study that you're going to do, I think a lot about being a parent with a stroller, and I don't know if you're able to do that because the accessibility, it's a similar issue that at least I've noticed and maybe could expand your like survey responses.
I will talk to Camille and Sharon, and so this is kind of the ACM over top of our property maintenance area and the city attorney's office that are running that. I know they've already put out the RFP. We've already received it back, and we've already kind of, I think, detailed that out. But I'm more than happy to have a conversation with either one of them and see is what they're going to do already going to kind of include that when they're looking at ADA. But I'll get your response to that one from somebody upstairs.
And Scott, I have a question in reference to the same thing Emily has asked. Earlier, you said that some of the questions were reconstructed, and I wonder if the reconstructions of whichever questions they decided to rewrite or to revise, did that have an impact or where we are doing negatively than our counterparts? And then secondly, I have seen that there are more street accessibilities for some handicaps, but it's not for all handicaps. I'm not only including mothers with strollers, but those who may have been walking with a walker or some kind of walking assistance other than a motorized chair. Those little bumps that they have on those ramps, they are very dangerous for those that are walking with, artificial walking tubes. I'm not sure the correct word to say. So I just wondered if they are looking into not only where there needs to be accessibility for handicap, but what type of accessibility for all handicaps, regardless of the handicap, they should all be able to access not only the sidewalks, but also in buildings that is frequently visited by handicapped people within the city, especially our government buildings. So
I think what we're working towards here, and Sarah, I'd ask you to make a note for this. We may come back with Transportation Director Jeff Fansler, along with the City Attorney Camille French, and do a little bit more of a kind of 15-minute dive into that question. It is the one that we have the highest variance from the benchmarks for, and it is one that I'll be perfectly honest, I know just enough to be dangerous on and not enough to answer the detailed questions. So it's probably a good idea for this group to have those subject matter experts come back and talk to you about that. Hey, Seta, to your first question of did restructuring the questions change any of these? I will tell you none of what you see on the screen currently is a restructured question. We, from year to year, try to do as little restructuring as we possibly can to this survey so that we can benchmark it and trend it. The restructured questions this year were about sustainability for the first time, adding them. We restructured a few police questions based on CALEA is the police certification entity, and they ask police to ask the questions a little differently. And then we actually removed water and sewer from this because our water and sewer system is doing their own customer survey and using the same vendor to do it. And it didn't make a lot of sense to ask the same questions in two different surveys. So water, sewer, police, and kind of sustainability are the only areas I think inside transportation, the way we ask every question, I don't know that we edited any of it from year to year. So that should not have affected the benchmarks at all for those.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. This is one that I did want to spend just a second on. Again, talked about it at the beginning. Where I told you a lot of the organizations that do this saw these kind of 7 to 10% drops in how you feel as a place to live, raise children, that kind of thing. This is one where we dropped pretty significantly. And again, we're the dark blue there. So you can see from 2023 to the 2025, where we dropped more than 10 points, and the benchmark stayed roughly the same. This is the value received for your city tax dollars. And again, I'm going to say, effectively raised taxes during the FY26 budget that we're currently in. And the reval made a lot of the tax burden shift to residential properties. So while the overall effective tax rate increase was less than 10%, you had residential properties on average getting a more than 20% tax increase. And both the city and county did that. And so if you own a home in Winston-Salem, most likely you felt a pretty hefty residential tax increase. And so this is one of the areas where we saw a shift downward, and essentially, kind of the benchmarks stayed the same. Again, it will be interesting, depending on what policies happen over the next year or two, to see how this one comes back. We had historically been in that 40+% range above the benchmarks relatively, and now are just at or below it. So that is the last slide that I have for you that I showed to council. I am going to try to tease you just a little bit with something that we are going to look at in the future of your meetings. Can everyone see this dashboard that's popped up? Yes, we're good? Okay. So as we receive this data, not only do we get a giant 150-page report and $400 worth of crosstab, or 400 pages worth of cross tabulations from ETC, they actually provide us the raw data, but without the ability to identify who the respondent is. So they give us census block level addresses so we know what ward they're in and kind of what area they're in, but not exactly who it was. There is a public-facing version of this dashboard that does not yet have the 2025 data in it. It just has the 2023 data in it. There is an internal version that I'm going to kind of show you here. We will be using in some of the meetings, and I apologize because it's the internal version. We have a lot of different views, and I'm going to click through these, and it's not intended for you to see them. Hopefully, when we get to the right places, they'll load. There are about 15 different views that we use, but we're going to give you the opportunity to ask some questions. We're going to get into some of these dashboards, and then ultimately, when Brandon comes back, we'll update the public-facing dashboard, and you'll have an opportunity at your leisure to play with it. But what we can look at is, of all the questions that we asked, which are the ones that residents are most dissatisfied with, which is what this view is showing. And so it rank orders them. And as you can see, there are the two that were above 50% for on-street parking. So those are the most dissatisfied services that we had. I can also change it and say, what are the services that people are most satisfied with? We would assume these are inverses of each other, but again, because of how people rank the neutral, that's not always the case. You do have some of these services, again, particularly with WISTA, where people aren't using it, where more than half of the people who respond are basically saying, I don't know, or they rank it as a 3. But generally speaking, people tend to focus on what are the dissatisfied services. And so we have the ability to say, is there any difference between what people in the East Ward and the North Ward think? Or is there any difference between what African Americans versus white or Caucasian people have responded to this? There also is a filter for how long you have lived in Winston-Salem, which can sometimes be very interesting. And the more important thing that we do, and we'll show you this is available to city departments as well. And we actually go back and filter the questions on our side by which department is it relevant to, so that the police department can come in and say, okay, here are the questions that are directly related to police. Are there differences in those questions between, again, where someone lives? Are there differences in kind of racial demographics and how they respond to them? And the answer is sometimes yes and sometimes no. At the 30,000 foot level, I would say There's not as much variation as people might think there is. One of the interesting ones I would say is when we look at this overall feeling of safety in the city. And so we can go to the satisfied side and you can see that, where did it go? Where is the overall feeling of safety? 48%. So 48% of our residents responded that they feel that they are satisfied or very satisfied, a 4 or a 5 with overall feeling of safety. Just for fun, I could click and you could see that is exactly the same for kind of white and Caucasian people. But if I were to click on African American, you can actually see that it's higher. Now, again, it's a 3% margin of error and we're at 4%. So we're kind of close to the margin of error. But we are going to work through some of these cross tabulations with you in the coming months. And we are going to dive into the data and say, are there differences between racial demographics? Are there differences between people in how they perceive services we want to get away from a ward mentality, but are different geographies experiencing things differently? And so I just wanted to tickle your fancy just a little bit with some of the tools that we're going to be using. Again, there's a lot of stuff we do with data mining in this. We can trend any of the questions, again, by the question. You can look over time. How have the satisfied, dissatisfied, or neutral respondents changed over time? And then we also have, I'm sorry, I'm clicking through, like I said, all the internal stuff, all of the benchmarks as well. And you can see them all in rank order and how much they've changed from year to year. And you'll see some of these percentages are weird. We have to go back and clear all of the filters that we had on previous pages to make the benchmarks work. But there is a lot that we intend to share with you and show you with respect to this in the coming months, all with the intent of being able to provide some feedback to council and maybe ask them some questions too about, are there some areas that you're not looking into that you should be? But again, I hope that this is going to be a fun experience for you. Any questions? Kind of that was my 20 or 30-minute overview of the work plan, just to show you what resident survey data looks like at a high level and what we're going to be diving into. Any questions about that before we move on to some of the more administrative functions of the agenda? Hopefully everyone is excited by this, or at least as mildly excited as I am with getting into the numbers. Alrighty. Seeing no questions in that area, I am going to ask Janice to kind of hop in, and she is going to talk about membership appointments, whether we want to elect the chair and vice chair today or next month, and then also keeping the schedule for dates and times for future meetings. So Janice, take us over for a second.
Hey, everybody. I thought I would just at least start with confirming who is in their first and second term, because I heard some guesses while you guys were introducing yourselves as to which term you're in. And so those who are in their second term in our current board are going to be Tony, Freddie, and then Haysetta and Jamesina just started their second terms this year. As for when these terms expire, for a majority of you, either your first or second terms are going to expire in the fall of 2027, so next year. And so that's going to be Paul, Emily, Miriam, Tony, and Freddie. And then Haysetta and Jamesina, since you just started your second term, your terms won't expire until 2028. I will say there are some available seats on CBAC currently. We're going to reach out to the mayor's office about those and see about getting those filled potentially this year. And so fingers crossed on that. So you might see some new faces coming up either sometime this year, either during this term or during our next fall term later this year. And are there any questions for me about term length or term appointments at this point? Awesome. I did want to go ahead and see if for chair and vice chair, if you guys are interested in electing your chair and vice chair today, or if you would want to wait until your next meeting. And if you do want to elect your chair and vice chair today, is there anybody who's interested?
And again, chair generally will help run the meetings. The most important thing for the chair is really we do the annual report to the city council. And so the chair, if available, is the one who gives that report. Staff does kind of consolidate the report and a summary of it, and we'll work on a slide deck for you. But the chair has that option, and then the vice chair helps run the meetings in the absence of the chair. And should the chair not be able to make that budget workshop or finance committee meeting, would also be the person who would be the fallback for presenting findings to city council. So as Janice said, y'all can nominate and elect some folks today, or we can push that to next month if you want to think about it.
I might vote to push to next month, just see if we have a more complete group. And if we do, that would be great. If we don't, I expect that, we'll have about the same at worst. So unless there's urgent business, I don't mind that as an idea.
Yeah, that sounds good. We can push to next month for that reason. All right. Well, then the next item of business is just confirming our meeting dates and times. So right now, we have our meeting dates on the third Wednesday of every month, and I can list those dates out if you guys need me to. And it's going to be at 9:30 every morning. I wanted to see if this day of the week and time in general works for everybody still. So the first one is obviously today, January 21st, but then we have February 18th, March 18th, April 15th, and then May 20th. And I believe I sent those out in the first email that I sent to you guys a few weeks ago as well. Is there any desire to change our meeting date and time from anybody?
I'm a little concerned about the April 15th
Okay.
because most of us, the budget managers, of course, that is tax day. And there will probably have heavy phone call volume and foot traffic. And all my last minute friends will be reaching out to do whatever and ask their last second questions and whatever. So I'm good. I mean, we've been meeting third Wednesdays and that's been okay for me. I'm a little concerned about April the 15th, just a little bit. It might
Okay.
be doable, but I hate to just keep being interrupted and keep putting um my camera on, turning it off and muting myself and I want to be able to pay attention. So that might be a rough day for me, I would say.
Okay. Well, thank you for letting me know. I definitely did not clock that that was tax day when I set the appointment, so that's on me. But we can definitely take a look at that. But yeah, we can keep it as long as everybody, if there's any concerns with any of the meeting dates or times, or just like the meeting date and time in general, just if you don't have any concerns in this moment, you can always just email me, Scott, or Sarah, and let us know, and we can reach out to everybody else and figure out what we need to make sure we can all meet. So,
All right. Well, we will keep this schedule, and then, like I said, Janice will send something out about that April one. May bump it a day or a week back or something like that, depending on how that helps. That is all we have for today. So unless anyone has anything else, again, I hope you are excited by the forthcoming work plan, but we will go and be adjourned unless anyone has anything else. All right. It was great to see you today. Please stay warm out there and cross your fingers for snow instead of ice, as we are doing, our streets department or division is doing, and hoping that it doesn't become snowmageddon. But we appreciate your time today, and we will see you next month.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.